Welcome to the podcast. This is Big Reptile Talk. I'm super excited today, man. We have one of the just a real innovator. To me, this is one of the OGs in the game. To me, one of the godfathers of the Exantic morph. And if you know me, you know the Exantic morph is just one of my favorites since I've been in the hobby. So without further ado, we're bringing JD Constriction to the chat. We gonna talk reptiles, man. How you doing today, sir?
Amazing. Doing great for a Wednesday night.
Yeah.
Not too bad at all.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And I'm happy to have you here, man. We got a lot of people in the chat. Best dressed balls is here. Mr. Troy saying what's up.
He's a good
Lecter.
looking dude, isn't he?
Lecter's here. Intel, Jamie, DG Reptiles, everybody, man. Troy said you should introduce him as a snake colorblind.
Well, I prefer to think just color challenged is how I like to think of it.
All right, well, man, we're gonna get some knowledge, man, and just hang out. But before we talk, man, we have to time travel, man, because I've been wanting to ask about this, man. So we're gonna go back to circa 2008, man. And
Ah,
I'm
look at that guy. God, he's a handsome devil. And then I'm right next to him. Yeah, that's me right next to that good looking dude, Brian Barczyk.
so right. So I said we got to go back to 2008, man. Talk about this picture, man. Where this was, what was going on, and kind of talk about your relation with Barczyk, man. How did y'all end up meeting?
Well, I started reptiles back in roughly 2003. And if I recall, '08 timeframe was about the first time I actually attended my first Tinley Park, which was super duper exciting. Here I'd seen only, pictures of some of these crazy morphs and combos, as well as the people in the hobby. And Brian Barczyk, snake bites, all that was popping back then. So it was super exciting to me to like go around and meet some of these people in the industry. And of course, I asked like everybody else, can I get my picture taken with you? And he of course obliged, which was awesome. But yeah, back then, like going to Tinley Park and checking things out for the very first time, I remember that feeling of seeing things for the first time and being to a big show like that. I'd only ever really been to, smaller shows. So I completely appreciate and actually wish I could relive those moments and try to vicariously through the people that come to the shows.
Right. Now, you've been in the hobby for so long, man. Can you talk to me about reptile expos? How was they back then versus now? Some of the differences that you've seen.
So yeah, great question. I think the biggest thing for me is it feels like they've gotten bigger, and I mean that in a positive way. Like there's more people that are coming through the doors. There's more vendors. There's more animal variety at the show. Ball pythons are still a huge portion of that. They're extremely popular, so they're well ingrained in the shows and the different vendors. So I just think it's grown since that point in time. I've seen it mature. I think I've also seen people become more conscious of branding and advertising and just adapting newer ways of like making a name for yourself, showing off your booth, your merch, stickers, all that fun stuff, which I totally geek out on. I think that's been just exponentially changed from way back then.
Right. Um, I want to ask, man, because you was at Tinley, man. Break down Tinley to me, man. I'm jealous. I just had Potter on like a couple maybe like a week ago. Potter and Cusco hopped on with me to talk about Tinley, man. Give me your experience at Tinley. I think it was like a week or two ago.
Yeah, so Tinley, as always, has been a fantastic show. I've been super bummed that we haven't had that show in a number of years now, just with COVID and everything else being extremely challenged. With that being said, I still love Mr. Potter and Bob Ashley for setting up the shows that they do set up, including the one down in Arlington, Texas. And actually, Troy at Best Dress Balls helps convince me to make the trek down to do the Arlington show here a little over a year ago. And I'm really glad I did because now that's another show in my rotation along with the Tinley Park show that we've been super happy with. It's a great run show as well. And for me, at least, it helped fill the void of not attending shows for so long during COVID and with Tinley Park not being around. But Tinley Park itself to me was as fantastic as ever in terms of the people, the number of vendors, the people through the door, how many different cool animals folks had. The October show is just always amazing for seeing all the new stuff that's coming out for the year and people showcasing those animals. It's very, very cool.
Right, right, right. Hey, honey, that's my wife. I gotta ask, man, because you've been in this hobby for so long. Do you remember your first snake that just really kicked it off for you?
I mean, I do, yeah. So, I mean, short version of my life story with ball pythons is I was terrified of snakes forever, still am. And I got a pet ball python from a pet store. Buddy got a deal if he bought three, and he was only looking to get two. So I ended up getting the third, and then ended up taking that animal home, studying ball pythons, different morphs and mutations in 2003, and ended up just getting blown away by xanthics in general. And so the second snake I bought in my entire life was a $3,500 xanthic female.
Hold on. We gotta rewind that. We gotta rewind that. Your second snake was a $3,500 exantic female.
Correct. I went from a $50 normal at a pet store to a $3,500 xanthic. People thought I was nuts.
Do you know if I spent $3,500 on a snake, my wife would kill me.
Well, so yeah, the short version of that story is there was no wife or girlfriend at the time. She left like the month before. So I had a bunch of money in my pocket that was supposed to go towards a ring, and I'm like, what's the stupidest thing I could spend that on? Let's go buy a snake.
Now,
So
now, now, do you remember that year? What year was that when you bought your first Xanten
2003.
Moore?
2003.
2003. Oh
Yep.
my God. Thank you, Miss Troy. Man, I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much. Happy to see JD on the podcast. He's responsible for the best dressed ball's name. Thank you so much, Troy. We're gonna leave that up there.
Yeah.
Um,
Thanks, Troy.
man, so how long, have you been breeding? Give me the years. When did you first start breeding?
Well, yeah. So I picked up those two hatchling females. The normal ended up being a female in 2003, and I was pairing and hatching out animals in 2006. So
Okay.
I've been doing this since '06, and the whole time xanthics. So one of my favorite timeline things for people to think about is firefly xanthics were my like first big long-term goal and first vision of a new combination that nobody had ever done before. And I started that in roughly 2004 is when I got the idea. And then ended up hatching them in it must have been 2013 then. I think that's right, 2012 maybe. But roughly 9 years from the idea to hatching the combination. So that's as you can tell from a lot of our animals, right? We have a lot of fire, a lot of pastel, really clean stuff. We've been selective breeding and trying to produce the best of that particular combination, now mixed in with tons of other genes since that point in time.
Right, right, right. So you said 9 years. Talk to me. How do you think, 9 years ago, how do you think the breeding was back then versus now? How do you think that the breeding game has evolved?
So great question. I think naively, like for me, it's just been me learning. Like that's been the biggest thing is spending the time working with the animals and getting to understand how ball python breeding cycles work and how they adapt within my environments that I have set up in my reptile room and those types of things. Basically, how our facility fluctuates through the winter times and springs and how females cycle. And I learned that through time, through spending time with the same animals year after year, through ultrasounds, through all that fun stuff. So I think the biggest eye-opening thing to me in recent history of things that have really changed in ball python breeding in the industry, and again, is at least from my perspective, is tub sizes. And I'll say this with a little bit of shame in my face. I've had the same exact like tub setup now for over 10 years. And then all of a sudden somebody's like, oh, da 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 da, yeah, I use FB40s for breeder females. I'm like, what's an FB40? And I completely felt left out. And then they show me this tub and I'm like, oh my God, this is great. Like this is a great tub. It's very in between. So like those types of things have really blown my mind that I've missed out on just because I haven't kept tabs on all the latest and greatest things. I'm the same way with some of these new morphs. I don't keep a good tab on what happens genetically each year. I just see the stuff that pops across my timeline. And there's some awesome stuff out there I had no idea people were working with, or that existed for new genes, that I'm just constantly trying to keep my tabs on, but I'm 5 years behind everybody, making the xanthic versions of things from 5 years ago.
I still love your example stuff,
Oh,
man.
thank
Like
you.
some of the
Thank
stuff
you.
that you produce is just it's jaw dropping.
I
So
appreciate
with
that.
of course, man. Now with that being said, I got to put you in the hot seat.
Sure.
So throughout my show, I have hot seat questions. So the
All right.
first
Fire
hot
away.
seat question, we love everybody, but who is Mr. John's favorite breeder right now?
Ooh, favorite breeder right now. I'm gonna throw out Ozzy at Ozzy Boyd's, and I'll tell you why. Because I look at him and I see a lot of how he runs his business and how he operates, like me. I remember talking to Oz in the 2008 show and talking about Orange Dream. And believe it or not, he had Orange Dreams on the table. He didn't know if there was a super. Like, he was a very humble guy about it was his gene, something that he was working with, but at the same time, he didn't know where it was going to go and what it was going to do. And so he was very honest up front about it. But that's a guy that's taken a single gene, like somebody else, and just developed the hell out of it to make great combos, make great examples of it, refined it with his, high contrast OD line. And like, I see a lot of parallelisms in what he's done for OD and his dedication to a particular gene. Same with me, trying to do the same thing with Xanthic, make crazy Xanthic combos and focus on a particular gene. So that's probably the guy that just pops out in my mind as being somebody I look up to and have a favorite, just because of how he operates and how similar. I would be lying if I didn't say I look at sometimes at what he does and I think about, okay, how can I reapply that to Xanthics? Be it the Dream Team concept or whatever, right? He has some good stuff out there, so I appreciate what he
Right, right,
does.
right. Ozzy is an amazing person. Um, he supports my channel. Amazing supporter, amazing guy. So definitely shout out to Ozzy. We're gonna go to Intel. He says he has a real quick question for JD. Are there any weak BP genes?
It depends on what you define as weak. So from a number of different angles, there's weaknesses in ball python genes, right? So, as an example, anything that has a wobble, spider, super spot nose, I don't even know all the different genetic combinations, maybe champagne, stuff like that. Anything that has that kind of neurological wobble, people do consider a weaker gene, and it's definitely is of less interest from a market standpoint. People don't always care for that. Then the flip side is there's genes that have issues, whether it be kinking or female reproductivity, those types of things, like desert, like caramel from way back in the day that not many people work with these days. Those types of things are super black pastel, super cinnamon type things with duckbill and kink. So that's what I would say is some of them.
Right, right, right. Shout out to BRH Reptiles. He said, "Hey, good people. I love the stormtrooper in the back, JD. I'm shocked I'm not your favorite. We are breaking up."
All right, well, we're taking a hiatus. Yeah, it's a little break. That's fine.
All right, man. So I want people to come here, have fun, get a little knowledge. So, can you give me some of your best new breeder advice for people that want to follow in your footsteps?
Yeah, so I mean, the biggest one for me, and again, going back to kind of what I commented earlier, saying, time was kind of my best teacher. I get started sooner rather than later. The thing that I always coach people up on is, if you are going to start in the ball python game, don't have it be with these really high end combos, these high value animals, that's the very first time you're raising a hatchling, the very first time you're doing breeding, stuff like that. If you've got those as babies, you got 3 years. That's 3 years of experience you could get. So you could go get yourself a nice big normal or single gene codom female or something proven breeder, and then a male to go with it, and just start breeding. Start understanding what your animals are doing, how your husbandry is, how your setup works for those females, understanding what you're looking at. You will do so much better 3 years later when those high end combos actually start pairing. You'll just have learned a lot. So that's my biggest advice is, if you're getting into breeding, start now, not in 3 years when you're, $3,500 exanthic female finally reaches sexual maturity.
Right, right, right. Now, I love that answer. Now, anybody knows me, they know I preach this in all my podcasts. The Xantic morph is my favorite. So this podcast had to happen because I just love your snakes. Now, I want to talk about the Xantic morph, get a little knowledge for myself. And I may have to pick a new favorite morph because someone told me that the Xantic morph browns out when it gets older. Is that true?
That's my actually pet peeve is everybody says they turn brown. And what I would tell you is I've never seen a brown exanthic until I went to a reptile show, I don't know how many years ago, where somebody was walking around with one and I was like, "Oh, normal, nice pet," or something. And they're like, "Oh, it's an exanthic." And I was like, "Oh." And here, I've got exanthics. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I've never seen one that looks like that." Um, but one of my number one pet peeves, everybody always asks that question. I understand the fear and everything, but the biggest thing I always tell them, and it's 100% true, is that exanthics darken as they age like countless other ball python morphs. Fact. They are going to get darker. The best they are going to look is a baby fresh out of the egg. They are going to get darker. Now, one of the things we do at JD Constriction is we're super conscious of selective breeding and bringing in super high quality examples of any gene we're bringing in. We aren't just bringing in a gene to bring in a gene and add it to Xanthic, or bringing in Xanthic to bring in Xanthic. We are bringing in the best examples we can find to make sure that the end result is jaw dropping, is exactly what we want it to be visually, and not just the genes. And moreover, that selective breeding is constantly refining and taking some of those great examples of adults and breeding them into the babies and then repeat, so on and so forth, just to keep making them look better. All that being said, you're never going to wash away the fact that they darken as they age. It's just built into the ball python genome. That being said, there's genes like fire, like vanilla, like desert ghost, hypo that do the complete opposite. They actually brighten as they get older. The animal examples with those genes looks better when it gets older. The secret to great looking xanthic combos, I've said this time and time again, is not only selective breeding, but putting in those highlighter genes, as I call them, that are just going to emphasize that coloration and fight that darkening that naturally happens in a lot of the genetic combos.
Right, right, right. Intel wants to know, are there any BP genes that get better with age?
Yeah, and so I would say it's definitely the ones I rattled off, like Desert Ghost, Fire, Vanilla, Hypo is another great one. All those to me look better the older they get. They increase their coloration and brightness as they age.
Right, right, right. Now, with you being in the hobby for so long, we got to talk about your first sale. Do you remember your first sale? And if you do, talk to me about that feeling that you had when you made that first sale.
Oh, that's a tough question. Um, so I won't tell you my first sale. I don't think I'll tell you the first one I remember. um, and it's not a super happy story. So one of the hardest lessons learned is when you incorrectly pack an animal, and you're probably the one that responsible for it being DOA on arrival. So I had a customer that purchased a pastel het exanthic male back in 2006, I want to say seven, somewhere in there, early on, and I put the animal in a deli cup. We shipped DHL back then. There was, but there was multiple options for shipping, but DHL was kind of the big thing back then. And I put a heat pack in. It was cold in Iowa, which it normally is, especially during the winter months. But it was headed to South Florida, which was not cold. So with the heat pack, the deli cup containing all the heat, and then going from 50-degree weather to 90-degree weather on a truck, it did not fare well, and the animal unfortunately passed. So that's like my first remembrance of a sale, if you will. Um, and then I quickly, did the right thing, and they contacted me, and I asked if they wanted a replacement, let them have their pick of the other males that I had, and sent them a different animal. But yeah, that was kind of my first memory of a sale. And there's been countless, animals sold and stuff like that since. But just going back to my learn from your mistakes kind of comment earlier with breeding, it's the same thing with packing. It's the same thing with shipping and all that stuff. You want to make those mistakes, or make sure you have the homework done to make sure you don't make them ahead of time. Experience is the best teacher.
I can't agree with you more. Like when you doing something, when you're breeding and when you're selling snakes, you almost have to make mistakes so you could learn and become even better than what you are. So mistakes, you got to make them. That's
Yep.
what makes you better. That's how
Yep.
you grow.
Yep. Yep.
I can't agree with you more now. Right now, how many, with not counting the hatchlings, how many, oh, real quick, H&P Exotics. He wants to know, do you do the TSK line?
Yes. Yep. We're all TSK, Snake Keeper, SK line. That's all we have. No other lines of Xanthic.
There you go, H&P. Yes, he does it. How many right now, not counting hatchlings, how many animals do you have on site right now, do you think?
I don't know. Rough numbers, 300 ish in the ballpark, 300 to 400. So I mean, I get that all the time, like from family and people at work and stuff like that. How many snakes do you have? And I'm like, I don't really know. And they're like, how do you not know? Well, I have eggs, and then the eggs hatch, and then we have sales, and we ship animals out, and those types of things. I can tell you, right? So we had 55, 54 breeder females this last year. I think we're going to end the year just barely with 30 clutches, which is an okay year. We can usually count on around 20 unless we're having a human child that year. I've pulled back in years past when we have a baby to single digit years. But yeah, we usually are in the 20s to low 30s and have the upwards of mid 40s on a really great year with that many females. That all being said, we're expanding actually. We're doubling our square footage in our facility, so we're hoping to be closer to about 90 to 100 breeder females here within the next year.
Right, right, right. Now, with you being, such an amazing breeder, I want to ask, do you feel like, the newer breeders or just breeders in general, do you feel like they need to breed rats to be successful to kind of, save a little money? Do you think you need to breed rats?
I I don't think so. I don't breed rats. So we have a live rodent shipment that we get in from a rodent supplier in the Chicagoland area that we get in weekly and coordinate with. Um, I think the financial aspect of it is very appealing to raise your own rodents because it's way more cost effective, but it's just a question of time and if you have the ability to do that. I've done it. I did it pre-kids. I did it pre-wife. And it was way more cost effective, but cleaning out rat tubs every 2 3 days and changing waters on top of a day job on top of breeding and selling animals was just too much. We might circle back to it and breed rodents again someday in the future, especially with the expansion. But definitely will be something where I have help, a lot of help. The kids are old enough to do it. Maybe I don't know. We'll see.
I, you know, my wife, I took her with me one time when I was going to buy some rats for some of my feeders. And she was like, "Oh my God, you just spent $60 on rats, Derek." And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "You should think about breeding." So I tried it. I didn't necessarily I didn't necessarily start breeding, but I bought a bunch of rats to see if I could take care of them. I tried it for like 2 to 3 days. I said, "Oh no, this is not for me." Just the
Yeah,
smell, just the smell. I was like,
yeah.
"Oh no."
Yeah, see, I'm in Iowa, so and I wouldn't say I'm a farm boy, but worked on farm implement machinery and everything else. I worked as a farmhand, so like none of that bothers me. Snake poop, nothing. Like I'm doesn't phase me at all. But it's just the amount of work. I mean, the snakes are once a week cleaning and feeding. The rodents are every 2 3 days. It's just way too
Right,
much.
right,
So,
right, right.
but yeah.
All right. Like I said, we got you here. We getting knowledge. I want to talk about incubators. What incubators are you using, and give me your opinion on store bought versus self made. What do you think is better, and what do you go with?
So I mean, I can honestly say I've never purchased an incubator. So my day job and my background is in engineering. So I've actually built every incubator that I've ever used, and the most recent iteration is basically a closet. I mean, it's effectively a walk-in incubator, but not that big. That's completely fitted with circulating air built in, a ducting system and heating system built in, dual redundant thermostats and everything, and it does great. Absolutely great. We're with the expansion, the doubling of our square footage. Obviously, we're going to need to provision for a larger incubator. So now we're kind of going to an even larger kind of walk-in / closet style double door incubator. But again, built essentially from the ground up. So that's kind of what we've been doing. I see a lot of great products with, I do eye them, the different incubators at shows and whatnot, and there's some really great products out there. It really all comes down to managing temperature and thermal mass appropriately, such that you have a good thermal gradient throughout and consistent temperature to incubate the eggs. It's not overly rocket science, if you will. I've used like old freezers and refrigerators and things like that as well, which have worked out great. I think the biggest secret that people don't think about, and this goes with building your own racks as well, is less is more. I think and I've lived this mistake. You think, well, more heat, more heat packs in the shipment, more heat, or heat tape around the snakes, more heat tape in my incubator. That's what I need, but you don't. You only need enough just to get it to the temperature you're trying to reach, and you really don't need any more than that. So that's something to think about too, because I've done the wrapping things in heat tape and being like, well, more is better, and then ended up having a thermostat failure and having issues. So
Right. So you heard it from the man himself. Don't buy none. Go make one. You can do it. Just
it can be
you
done.
know, if
It
he
can be done. But yeah,
Johnson, if
buying
he
it
doing it,
would
you
be
can do it
easy
too.
too. That's the easy way to do it. Yeah, to trust the professional to do it for you.
Right. Now, for a lot of the newer breeders out there, what do you think is best to start with? Do you think a newer breeder should start with a powerhouse male first or a powerhouse female?
So yeah, great question. It depends on kind of what your go-to-market strategy is, right? If you're a hobbyist breeder that you just kind of want to breed for fun and maybe do some of that with your kids or your family, I think the world's your oyster, whatever you want to go do. And I think it still goes back to get those proven breeder animals first to actually cut your teeth on and learn as a family with everyone that you're including in that. I think if you're really looking for long game, if your business strategy and go to market strategy is essentially to do worlds first and come in with great ideas, things like that, I think it's all about, and I'll say this selfishly, it's all about focusing on particular genes such that you can then outpace other people and things that people aren't working with in heavy numbers to get your name and get that recognition out there. Um, so I think it just depends on what you want to do. A lot of times we say like, are you just a me too? Hey, that guy has those snakes and that guy has those snakes and that guy. Well, I'm a me too. I'm just like all those guys. I have all these different kinds of snakes. I could hatch the same thing that guy and that guy and that guy could hatch. It's a lot more interesting from a business standpoint if you're the only guy or girl hatching those types of animals and or those animals in quantity. Makes it definitely so you stand out.
Right. Excellent answer. I love your answer. Now I got to give you a hot seat question.
Fire away.
I feel like you're a legend. You're making your mark in the
Ah,
hobby. You're an OG. You one of the originators. So let's play a game. I'm a movie producer, and I'm making a movie about JD Constriction. So who am I casting to play Mr. John? Anybody in the world who's gonna play you in your
um,
autobiography movie?
I'm gonna have to go with Ryan Reynolds. I've been told I'm a chubby Ryan Reynolds, so and my mannerisms and everything else are very Deadpoolish. I'm wearing a Deadpool shirt with a freaking unicorn, rainbow unicorn on it. So yeah, I think I'm gonna go with Ryan Reynolds.
I love that. I would love to see that, man. That is hilarious. You do look like Ryan Reynolds.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've gotten that a few times. I always tell my wife, I'm like, see, I am cute. I'm attractive. And she's like, eh.
All right, man. Now I got to show this picture because to me it's just mind blowing, and we got to talk about this, man. We got to talk about this. This is just mind blowing. Now, before I even show it, I need you to understand something. When I get on Google and I type in Stormtrooper ball python, do you know pictures of your snakes come up?
Yeah.
Just like you, not very many other people. You and I was like, This is incredible. Now we got to talk about this snake, man. Talk to me about this snake, man. And do you remember producing it? It's just gorgeous. And I want to ask, is would you know? Because I'm still learning myself. I'm not ashamed to admit it. There is no dumb questions. Is this it's a stormtrooper, but would it be considered a Xantic morph too?
It is. So I can give you the quick rundown of kind of where that animal came from and where it is
Yes.
today and that type of stuff. So I'll tell you comically, I've told this story a few times, and everybody's expecting some sort of great grand update or reveal, but everything's out there. I just don't have any new information. So um, the Stormtrooper came out of a pairing with two different males and a pastel exanthic female. I produced the males, and I purchased the pastel exanthic female. Out of the clutch came combos that I'd seen before, as well as a pastel exanthic female, what I thought was one that just looked weird. It looked different. And what started happening is it went through its first shed, some of the color peeled away even more. And I was like, well, that's interesting. I mean, not within the shed, but just it looked even brighter in some of the lighter colored gray and white areas. I'm like, well, that's interesting. And then we started to feed it, and it went through another shed, and then it peeled away even more color. Well, then over the course of about two more sheds, it ended up looking like the animal that you see in the picture. And I was just like, what is going on here? This thing's crazy looking. So I started posting pictures and all that fun stuff, and took it to the March Tinley Park show that year. Um, and it's either a genetic combination of a recessive that we have in our collection that I didn't know we had, or it's a fluke. And I can't tell you which one it is at this point. I have had that female since I think it's 2015 or 16. I don't even remember. I think it's 17 maybe. And she went to like all these shows, and all these people held her, and we don't feed animals when we go to shows and everything else. She turned into I like threw food at her, but she turned into a really picky eater. She hit about 900 grams and just hit this huge wall. And I was trying everything, new tub sizes, cleaning the tub every shed, different rodent types, everything I could. And she was just never consistently feeding. So she has taken forever to get to size. I thought there was a chance this last year I would get her big enough to be breedable, but she just wasn't big enough for me to chance it. I'm hoping again this year I'll be able to pair her and at least get some animals out of her that I can hold back, hopefully a male, and breed back to her just to start to answer some questions of is it a fluke or genetic variety or what. Um, but yeah, it's an animal we still have today. It turned a lot darker, which is another thing that happens randomly, completely independent of that, and in some exanthic morphs. But yeah, it's been I'll say one of the biggest marketing animals that we've ever had, because our Instagram, our Facebook, everything blew up when that animal came out.
Right. Now the chat is going crazy, man, because when I gave you that movie question, everybody is saying you look like Paul Blart.
Sure, I just don't have the mustache, right? Doesn't Paul Blart have a mustache?
Now, to me this is incredible, and I gotta ask this. Like I said, there's no dumb question. I'm
Yeah,
trying to
yeah.
learn, and to me, you one of the Exantic Kings, and everybody knows it's my favorite more. And so I gotta ask this, man, because like I said, I'm learning. Did you create the Stormtrooper?
Yeah, yeah, that's our animal.
So the Stormtrooper is your personal morph.
Uh,
That's mind
yeah,
blowing.
yeah. So, I mean, when it came out, I didn't know what to call it. It was at least pastel. It was at least exanthic, but I don't know if it was something else or what's going on or a fluke. And so I was posting pictures and stuff, and I couldn't even tell you who said it. I'm apologizing to them right now, but somebody was like, "You should call it the Stormtrooper. It looks like a Stormtrooper." I'm like, "That's the greatest idea ever. I'll name it the Stormtrooper." So I did, and then yeah, it just got a huge following online, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, everything. People have been very interested in that animal, myself included. And I get asked about it at every show. Did you bring the Stormtrooper? I'm going to get T-shirts made that said, "You missed the Stormtrooper. She went that way," or something like that. Uh, but yeah, we hatched that animal and we still have it. Yep, she's still here, despite the rumors
This
that it got sold or died or it's right. I post at least 1 to 2 pictures of it every year, especially If you go back to April Fool's Day last year, she was on eggs, chicken eggs.
I seen that, the chicken eggs. I seen
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yep.
I love your sense of humor, man. But for me, this is incredible, man. We got the inventor of the stormtrooper. This is wild. Real quick, first, hey, shout out to TJ's Exotics for that $50 super banger, man. I appreciate you, man. He said the stormtrooper, sell it to me.
He'd love it. I'm sure he would.
Oh, okay, man. So I want to ask you, man, and can you talk about longevity? Because, like I said, there's a lot of breeders that want to follow in your footsteps, and you're not just gonna make money instantly. So, can you talk about just the long game, the longevity of breeding, and not necessarily the longevity. I don't want to know how much you made, but can you talk to us about how long it took you before you actually started seeing returns on your
Great,
investments?
great question. Because I talk to people about this a lot. It is a lot about patience, and this is not true for everybody. But just rewinding back, Xanthic was kind of a popular gene among very few genes early on, and then it lost popularity, as well as a bunch of other genes that today are supremely popular. But back then they kind of lost popularity. It was the next thing. And to be fair, everybody was looking a lot at single gene combos. 15 years ago, things were popping out with new genes every other week that were mind blowing. Like, we didn't have 300 different genetics or whatever even the number is now, to pick from. We had like five. And so every time there was a new one, like, that was the next hottest thing. Well, what it is morphed into, right, is combos. So for me, sticking it out meant sticking with Xanthic, not getting distracted by all these other things popping out, and just focusing on making combos so that the long game of getting those combos out could actually turn it into a profitable business and set us apart from other breeders. And that patience took about 9 years to get into the black from the red, which is a long time for any business to take almost a decade to be profitable. And thankfully, like, this was never still isn't a full-time job. I had a main job, stuff like that, but it did become self-sustaining, hopefully fairly quickly, and you control your investments, so to speak, which they aren't all good investments. You make mistakes along the way, like I've said. But yeah, it's about sticking with it really to get it profitable. In my opinion, it's a patience game.
Right, right, right. And I can't agree with you. When you're getting into that breeding game, if you're not in it for the long haul, you're not gonna freaking make anything because it's not let's make money in a week. It's a invest. You gotta sometimes you gotta grow your holdbacks up. It's just about that patience and that waiting. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um BRH Reptile said he wants to ask you about the magic card from Tinley.
Yeah, so he's particularly proud of this one. It was actually a picture Brian took of me holding the Firefly Xanthic Clown female that we hatched this year at the Arlington show. And if you actually go back through my Instagram, you can see the picture of the card. I
I seen it
had
with a sticker. It's a sticker.
Yep, yep, and a reflective sticker as well. But basically, had a Magic the Gathering kind of tabletop playing card game card made from his picture, um, that Brandon Millum of not Psychotic Exotics, Asylum Exotics, I think I have that right, helped do the design for. And so it's basically a fun little trading card that has our Firefly Xanthic uh, animal on the front of it, and then a QR code on the back with our morph market availability.
I need one. Where do I get it? I need one.
You email me your address and I will send you personally one. If everybody does that, I will not do that. Not that I don't want to, but I already have a backlog of former customers. They're like, damn it, I need one of those cards. I'm like, you're a customer, I get it. Everybody that's a new customer, anybody that buys anything from me, it's in the box right now at this point. But I'm a busy man with little kids and snakes and a day job, so I'm not right now mailing out tons of letters filled with swag. But for you,
Hey,
email me your address. I will get you one.
hey, John said that, Mr. John. That's love, sir. Y'all heard that, man.
No, that's a
When
thank.
we
That's
get
the least I can do is a thank you for having me on. No.
That's love. So when we get that, we showing that off. That's love. I'm
That
sending
sounds
sending the
awesome.
address. Now, like I said, man, you're an OG in the game. I want to get some knowledge, man. So, we all talk about, the ball python season, if you will. And the reason I want to say that is I want you to give us, what do you think the best months to breed are? And that's for a lot of the new breeders. Give us a start day and an end day. What do you think is a good time to start your season and end your season?
So great question. I've done it a number of different ways over the years. October's been the earliest I have started my breeding program. January's been about the latest. And the biggest thing I've learned is, for the most part, the females are reliable. Um, the females will develop follicles pretty much at the same time every year. You can influence that. You can change it over time, especially if they have a year off. You could do that and manipulate them to go maybe months different, up to a couple months different from when they normally lay, maybe even 3 months. But for the most part, the females are pretty consistent. It's for that reason I always tell myself I'm going to start earlier every year. October's too early for me. Best case scenario, I'm breeding in November. More often than not, it's sometime in December, just based on when I can get everything coordinated and think through my pairings. And I've put some of the last clutches or babies away from the year before, those types of things. Um, but yeah, I get eggs pretty much as early as April, May, hatchlings even in that time frame, I guess. April, May time frame, and then I'll get babies even the start of the year, sometimes with really late clutches.
Right, right, right. I love that answer. Thank you for giving us that knowledge. Now with you, breeding and you've been doing it so long, can you give us some tips? What are some of your tips that you use when you have a male that won't breed for you, like a stubborn male?
I blame the female right away. So I think, me personally, like I do see more often the female's just not receptive, be it to that male, be it to the situation, be it to where her follicular development is. It's more on her. But then you get the males that are like hyper aggressive, that go out to the club at night and put roofies in the girls' drinks and all that fun stuff, and they're after it, but it might be for naught. The female's not super interested, she's just not fighting it off. So it really kind of, I think, is up to the female more often than not. So that just tells me, well, maybe I'll slow my roll a little bit, throw the male in a couple more weeks, those types of things. If I have a younger male, though, that I'm trying to get breeding, trying to get going, I'm a big fan of other proven breeder male sheds being thrown in with the female, and then also doing the sperm plug wipe from one male, from a breeder male, and putting it on the male or on the female that you're introducing the younger, more juvenile male with. And I think that helps get a reaction. And what I actually think that is more of is, my opinion is, it's triggering the male to start sexually maturing faster more than anything. I think it's getting him going so he understands what he needs to go do.
Right, right, right. That makes sense. That makes sense. I love that you just giving us this game, man. We're so appreciative. Now I got to give you another hot seat question.
All right, let's do it. Paul Blart.
So I like to compare a lot of the breeders to luxury stores. And what I mean by that is y'all breeding designer ball pythons, 5, 10,000, $15,000 snakes. So, if we start and I say Cabela's Louis Vuitton, Ozzy is Coach. If I'm shopping at JD's Constriction, cut what store am I shopping at when I shop at JD's Constriction? Luxury store.
Ooh. I don't see that. This is where my wife would probably kick me, because she's like, I know all the luxury stores. Uh,
You
and
got like Coach, Michael Kors.
you could tell how much clothes shopping I do. She does it all, right? Yeah, she's the Louboutin girl for sure. But so, like, I'll give you my car analogy, because that actually makes more sense to me. Like, if your typical breeder is like a Ford dealership or a Chevy dealership or things like that, I feel like JD Constriction is is the Mustang dealership. So we've got affordable options, the base V6 models, but then we've got the fucking Shelby GT350s and everything else too if you really want it, but it's all Mustangs. There's nothing, you aren't going to find a truck on the lot. You aren't going to find a four door. You ain't going to find a minivan. It's just Mustangs. You don't walk up to me and be like, "Yeah, can I see a truck?" Or "I'm interested in a white pickup." Like, I don't have a white pickup. Well, can you find me one? No. I can
Uh,
tell you who sells white pickups. So
right, right, right.
that's my car version of your question, if that's acceptable.
Well, let's see what the chat say. So, father son reptile said you the Gucci.
Uh,
HMP said you. HMP said you Ralph Lauren. Shout out to
Ralph Lauren.
HMP.
Oh,
Now, BRH reptile said
Apple.
JD's
Is
Apple.
he saying I'm Steve Jobs?
Troy said
Kmart.
you Kmart.
Yeah.
Troy cutting up. JD is Gucci. Shout out to Zach Schrader. He said this is a awesome podcast. He said great job to me and you. So we appreciate you. Much love, Zach.
Awesome.
Um, now, like I said, man, we having fun. We getting knowledge. I appreciate you being here. So give us some tips, man. What are some of the tips and some of the things that you do to make sure that you don't have slugs?
So I can tell you one of my biggest lessons was, again, I'll say early in my career, and that was palpation. So I've gone through watching the animals. I've gone through palpating them and mentally, is that a golf ball? Is that a marble? Those types of things. And I own an ultrasound. I've used an ultrasound pretty heavily for several years. Not anymore, but I have. And my biggest lesson I learned relative to slugs was over palpation. I palpated animals a lot just to understand where they were at and everything. And I had so many slugs this year. In fact, I think I have an article on my website about it. And it was just dumbfounding to me. And I ended up having a great conversation years ago. I couldn't even tell you the year, with Tracy Barker of VPI. Um, and she and I basically talked about it. And the eye opening conversation she had with me is, ball pythons by nature are going to pick security over thermoregulation. They're going to pick hides, they're going to pick being comfortable, out of sight, those types of things over thermoregulating their bodies. And if a female is stressed or too hot, she is going to ovulate prematurely. And when she does that, she is not going to properly fertilize those eggs, and you're not going to get healthy, good eggs from that. So by palpating them, she was effectively saying I was overstressing them, doing as much as I was doing. And also, in any situation with like open air rack systems and clear tubs and things like that, you can run into a scenario where they're insecure and they're using the hide over the hot spot or what have you, and it's too warm, and it's actually causing them to prematurely ovulate and drop slugs. So it's simplistically, I put on the baby gloves whenever I'm handling females that I believe are building towards ovulation, to make sure that they don't get pushed over the edge, not throwing rodents in, not messing with them at all, letting things be as stress free as possible, um, to let them ovulate naturally and in a comfortable environment such that I avoid slugs. Do I still get slugs? Absolutely. There's probably some much better tips or people out there that could provide insight into, avoiding one or two slugs here or there. But for the most part, we usually get good clutches now. So that's been eye opening.
Mr. Johnson, you supposed to, you don't never tell nobody. You supposed to be like, do I get slugs? No, never. This is what I do. No.
Yeah, no,
You get
and when
slugs,
there's
you're doing it
zero
wrong.
slugs and all healthy veins, I'm like, yes, that went right.
Right now. I'm gonna tell a story, and this gonna lead into the next question.
Sure.
You've been in the game for years. We had Miguel on from Always Evolving Pythons, and he gave us a crazy reptile expo story. He said a guy hit on him. So a guy comes up to him at the expo. He's like, "Hey, after the expo, let's go get some beers." And Miguel was like, "Shit." I was like, "I'm down. I love beer." So they went and had beer, and after they got done drinking, the guy looked at Miguel and said, I got a room down the street. And Miguel's like, whoa, this ain't that kind of party. And and I hope he don't kill me. I tell that story because it's freaking hilarious. He told it on our podcast. So I use that story, and I always want to ask, do you have any crazy reptile expo stories?
Ooh, good question. I'm trying to think of one. I will tell you, it's not that crazy, but it's probably my favorite, most memorable reptile show story. So I've never actually vended Daytona. I've never vended it, but I've attended it now, I think 3 times. And the last time I went, um, I was hanging out with my buddy Carlos of OTB Reptiles, and him and I had a fun time at the show, checking stuff out, and then we went back to the hotel. And he's like, "Hey, I got a bottle of, I think it was Lafroig 18, and some, I couldn't even tell you the cigars." And he said, "Let's go down, hang just out off the beach after dark, and just drink really good scotch and smoke a cigar." And I will tell you that that is like one of my most memorable moments from a reptile show experience. Just sitting at the back of the hotel, listening to the waves crash against the beach, drinking a scotch, smoking a cigar, and the flavor was just married up so well and magical. Talking reptiles, talking snakes in Daytona Beach, Florida, at the reptile show. That was like awesome. That's like of top 10 reptile moments. Say, well, hatching a stormtrooper, this or that. That was actually one of my like, this is just awesome. That was really, really cool.
I believe it. I'm jealous. It sounded like it was a fun time. I'm pissed I wasn't there.
Yeah, next time. I want to relive that many times. If I can try and repeat it, I will.
Right. Now, can you give us a sneak peek, man? What are some of the current projects you're working on right now?
Oh, sure. So generically, I try and map out 2 to 3 years of pairings. So I utilize the males that I just hatched as well as the females and map out those all through breeding for the next 3 years, just to understand kind of what I might produce, what I'm holding back, those types of things, because I think it gives me insight to see a few years pairings in terms of where I want to go and what types of males I want in the future and or females, that type of stuff. So the highlights for me in the next couple of years, I'm big into Xanthic clowns, as you kind of see with my Firefly Xanthic clown stuff we hatched this year. I'm looking to make more stuff with Xanthic clown. I will tell you, like people like Justin Kovakia and others that have made very cool clown combos have inspired me to be like, that would look cool in Xanthic. I should work on that. So um, next year I'd have to think about what I have down for pairings, but a few of the things are essentially like Superfly Xanthic clowns, Superfly NG Xanthic clowns, those types of things. Basically taking it up another notch with the additional pastel gene in those animals, as well as just making a few more examples of them. And then from a breeder male standpoint, I think probably the biggest stuff I'm interested in is I have a first shot at some triples next year, which I'm really excited about. In particular, hypoxanthic pieds, which I think will, xanthic pieds are nice, but by the time you throw a highlighter gene like hypo on there, it's just going to really look fantastic. So that's another one I'm super
Amazing,
excited about. Yeah,
man. You're
I'll even be
killing it.
a little non nerdy, well, overly nerdy with you. Like I get excited about future project animals. Like it's not the animal this year, it's what it can make in 2 to 3 years. Like those get me excited when I'm like, oh yeah, that just I hatched this, and now in 3 years I could make a triple or a quad with that. That gets me really excited.
Right. I love that, man. I can't wait to see it. Now, give me your take on, your egg cutting. Are you for it? Do you think are you against it? Do you cut eggs? What's your take on egg cutting? And
Yeah,
real quick, before you say that, Troy said he's surprised it wasn't you watching him eating pig intestines.
that is a favorite of mine. So if you don't know, Troy is both a picky eater as well as some dietary restrictions. So he's one of the best people for a foodie slash guy that eats literally anything like myself to go with. And I convinced a small group to go to a Korean barbecue, a nice one, and we ordered the usual like ribeye and all this stuff. And they're like, yeah, this is good. And then when the waitress came back, I'm like, we're all white people. I want you to bring me stuff that you wouldn't normally bring white people. Like that's what I want to eat. And and so she's like bringing us back pig intestine and like tripe and all this stuff, and I'm like cooking it up and eating. I'm like, oh, that's not very good. Oh, Troy here. And to his credit, Troy did eat a little bit of pig intestine, which I wouldn't have thought. Raw, then quickly fried or cooked pig intestine by yours truly. So
Man, shout out to Troy, man. I've been trying to get that best dressed balls podcast, man. So hopefully we're gonna make that happen, Mr. Troy, sir.
I will happily guilt him into it. I don't think he's opposed to it at all. I'll happily rib him a little bit to get on with you. That's not a problem.
Right. Right. I love that. Now, like I said, give me your take on egg cutting. Do you do it? Are you for it? Are you against it? How do you feel about egg cutting?
I do it. Am I religious about it? No. I'm not religious about doing it or not doing it. That being said, I'm on both ends of the spectrum, and what I mean by that is, on the one end, I had never really experienced animals drowning in the egg like people feared, and I was kind of like, does that really happen? And then I had it happen. So I was like, there's fully developed animals in a few eggs that I just let go, and I was like, well, that was weird. They didn't have teeth. So, so I'm a little more conscious of doing cutting. That being said, on the other end of the spectrum, if you're cutting eggs and you don't know what you're doing, you're definitely putting the animal in jeopardy. And what I mean by that is, people that cut the skylight windows on the whole animal is not the right answer unless it's a day away from emerging from that egg and its yolk is pretty much absorbed. I cut a little tiny V slit and then peel it up to take a look and give the animal enough room such that it can stick its head and climb its body out. And I put that flap right back down after I've cut that egg. So what most of the time happens is I'll get animals that'll do some cutting on the egg themselves, but then actually come out of that little hole that I created. And then it also just, like I said, kind of protects them and gives them the buffer they need to stay in there long enough to make sure they absorb all that yolk and don't come out prematurely. I'm a firm believer if you do it wrong and you cut too big a hole or cut too much too early, especially if you don't know your incubator, don't know the timing of the eggs hatching, those type of things, you could kill those animals. They will for sure leave the egg prematurely, end up dragging their umbilicus and the unabsorbed egg yolk out and causing issues, and then being just a nightmare for you.
Right. Do you have any videos on egg cutting?
I don't think I do. I've debated it. I feel like I should, but I don't. No, maybe I'll do a live of one of our clutches or something at some point in time. Post that
Right.
up.
HMP wants to know what's your opinion on the spider gene because he respects your opinion.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna parrot Justin's words because I actually think he said it best. And I agree with what he said, and that is, the spider gene is a powerhouse in terms of its history within the ball python industry and its popularity. I also am a firm believer in spider as a gene does really well in captivity and also produces some combos that you just don't see with any other genetic combination. They're truly unique. Um, the spider gene, from my experience, has never had issues. I've never owned a spider. I've certainly seen one, but I've never owned a spider that just spun and spun and spun. But they all have some level of wobble, some level of neurological. But as most people that know that have dealt with ball pythons, when they have issues, when they aren't feeling well, when they aren't healthy, when they have environmental challenges or husbandry isn't on point, they aren't going to eat. They aren't going to successfully lay eggs and breed. I don't see that in spiders. They eat well, they breed well, they reproduce. So you don't see that common reaction that would lead me to believe that it's a health threatening kind of issue. Because it just, you don't see that. That being said, you do see a market trend where less and less people are interested in spider. And so as a result of that, I'm clinging tightly to a few Xanthic projects with spider that I think will be really, really neat. Um, but every year I pull back a little bit more and more in terms of how much spider we breed into our collection, just due to market demand more than anything, but also just to refine our collection.
All right. Well, I want to talk to you about something that I've been seeing in the hobby that's been kind of, to me, is kind of not necessarily a newer problem, but just kind of what's your take on it? And I wouldn't say it's a problem. I say to each his own. Do what you want to do. You know, your snakes, do what you want. But what's your take on breeder loans? How do you feel about that?
Um, my best advice would be never do a breeding loan if you're not 100% comfortable with losing everything you put into it. So don't do a breeder loan with anybody. Don't give them animals if you're not 100% comfortable with those animals never coming back and you getting zero from it. That's my opinion. They're very difficult with both friendships and people and everything else to keep everybody happy, and everything's subjective. But yeah, the biggest thing is go in expecting nothing, assuming the worst, and then when something good or the best happens, it's all gravy.
Right, right, right. I love that answer. That's smart. You don't do nothing that's gonna, ruin a friendship, ruin, just any relationship that you got. And if you are gonna do it with somebody that's reputable, somebody that you know.
Yes.
But man, for Mr. John, you gave me this an amazing hour. I like to keep my podcast between 45 minutes to an hour. That way we can get you on in the future, kind of see what you're doing. First, I just want to thank you and just, you are an innovator, and I feel like you one of the, like I said, the kings of the exotic morph, if
Well, I
not the
appreciate
king.
that. Thank you.
Um, you know, Amazing podcast. Shout out to everybody in the chat, especially Troy, BHR Reptile. Shout out to
TJ.
man. Right, right, right. Shout out to TJ's Exotic Reptiles, man, for the super chats. I appreciate you. Before we leave, and I got one more question, and it's a hot seat question.
Let's do it.
Now, I think Father Son said awesome podcast. I appreciate that, man. Much love, much love. Um, I don't know, you said you have a wife or a girlfriend?
I have a wife and two little kids.
Amazing. Now, I'm trying to get you in trouble.
All right, let's do it.
The hot seat question. You have so many ball python projects. Have you ever lied to your wife about the cost of a snake for a project? You're like, baby, this is 200, and she ended up finding it was 800.
No. Nope. Nope, I have not. I've definitely waited to tell her later, or waited for her to ask the questions, but I always have told her the truth of what it was. And the truth is, right? She knew that was part of the deal. We met after JD Constriction was founded, basically, and so she knew the snake. She knew it existed. She knew what I did with it and everything else, and so she kind of got it. She knows that I know what I'm doing, so she pretty much trusts me. So that's the awesome part of it. But yeah,
Hey, Mr. John, so you're a smart man. Happy wife, happy life, right?
that's right. That's right.
And speaking of what, shout out to my wife. She's in the chat. I love you. So Mr. John, I just want to say thank you. I'm getting ready to post this. This was an amazing podcast. Hopefully in the future I can get you on again and just pick your brain. That's the basis of my podcast. I like to get a little bit of knowledge and have a little bit of fun, man, because that's what it's about.
No, absolutely. I'd love to be back on anytime. Just let me know. Happy to be on, Derek. Thank you.
All right, Mr. John, I'm gonna let you go. You have an amazing night, sir.
Likewise. You too. See you later. Thanks, everybody.
All
Thanks for
right.
joining.
All right. Amazing podcast, man. This is Big Reptile Talk. We just had, like I said, the king of the exotic morph. We picked his brain. We got a little bit of knowledge, and we had fun. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Much love, man. Especially that's my brother right there. Shout out to Reese's Pythons. I love you, brother. Um, Stay tuned for my next guest. Shout out to Max Interstellar Reptiles. He said, great live. I love you. Everybody in the chat, make sure you go check out My Animal House Show, Iron Dog, Kurtwood, Reese's Pythons, Venom Wonderful, Reptile Feedings, just a whole bunch of good people, man. So we out of here. Until next time, man. It's all love, brother.